Greetings and welcome to the Season 2 season finale of Romeo on Shakespeare. Today's episode is all about... This can't be good. Please excuse me a moment. Hello, Catherine? Whoa, hold on. You sound very upset. I'm having a hard time understanding you. Please, calm down. I know it's your wedding day. What's going on? You're having trouble with Petruchio? Already? You say he's very possessive and he treats you like an object. Well, what did he say? And what did you say? You said, I'm not just one of your many toys. You don't say. I can't believe that's all you said. Oh, you asked him why, if your sister Bianca could go with other boys, why did you have to have a prearranged marriage? Well, what did he say? He said you're his goods? His chattels? His house? His household stuff? His field? His barn? His horse? His ox? Look, I'm no expert in 1592 Padron marriage contracts. Hold on a minute. Well, I'll be... Look, forget about all that. If you want to have the kind of relationship where your feelings matter, then you need to set Petruchio straight. Tell him, hey, I'm all for inside jokes, but don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to say. And please treat me with respect when I go out with you in public. If my feelings matter to you, don't put me on display. I want us to have a serious relationship. And if you want me to obey you, don't try to change me in any way. And one last thing. Don't tie me down, because I never stay happy like that. So treat me like a wife, and remember, no matter what that marriage contract says, you don't own me. Would you give it a try? Great. That's all I ask of you. You're very welcome. All right. Now, dry your eyes and good luck. Oh, wait, Kate, just one last thing. How did you get a phone? Never mind, it doesn't matter. Bye-bye. Don't judge her. I bet you'd cry too if it happened to you. I was once listening to the actors in Monty Python's Flying Circus explain how to make something funny. They said there's two ways to do this. The first is you take one character who acts crazy and put him around a bunch of normal characters. Or you could take a bunch of characters who are acting crazy and have one normal character trying to observe them. This formula certainly worked well in television series like Cheers, Night Court, Seinfeld, Scrubs, and The King of Queens. But as we look at the farce presented in The Taming of the Shrew, we'll find that Shakespeare really laid the foundation for situation comedies 400 years ago. So let's take a look at the plot. Prior to the first act, there is an induction, like a prologue or an explanatory scene that stands apart from the main play, in which we learn that the main play is being performed in front of a befuddled drunkard named Christopher Sly, who has been tricked into believing that he is really a lord. The play is performed in order to distract Sly from Bartholomew, a servant dressed as a woman who's pretending to be Sly's wife. In the play performed for Sly, Katharina, or Kate, who is playing a shrew, is the elder daughter of Baptista Minola, a lord in Padua. Most men deem Katharina as being unmarriable because of her nasty, hot-tempered, and strong-willed disposition. On the other hand, men such as Hortensio and Gremio are anxious to marry Kate's beautiful and desirous younger sister, Bianca. However, Battista decides that he will not allow Bianca to marry until he can unload Catherine on a husband. As a result, Bianca's suitors agree to work together to find a husband for Kate so that they can vie for Bianca's hand in marriage. Meanwhile, Lucentio, who has recently come to Padua to attend university, instantly falls in love at first sight with Bianca. Lucentio overhears Battista say that he's seeking tutors for his daughters, and so Lucentio disguises himself as a Latin tutor named Cambio in order to woo Bianca, unbeknownst to Battista. Meanwhile, Lucentio's servant Tranio pretends to be Lucentio. In the meantime, Petruchio arrives in Padua from Verona with his servant Grumio. He meets and explains to Hortensio, an old friend of his, that since his father's death, he's decided to travel in hopes of marrying for money. Hortensio tells Petruchio about Catherine, who will have a large dowry when she weds, but also warns him about her nasty personality. Hortensio also asks Petruchio to present him to Battista, disguised as a music tutor named Lizio. So, at this point, Lucentio and Hortensio both attempt to woo Bianca, with each of them pretending to be tutors, Cambio and Lizio, respectively. Petruchio strategically pretends that any harsh things that Kate says or does are kind and gentle to confound Katharina's shrewish nature. After meeting her, Petruchio tells Battista that he and Kate have agreed to marry, provided Battista furnishes them with a sizable dowry. Overjoyed, Battista consents, and even Bianca's suitors agree to chip in so that they can pursue Bianca in marriage. Catherine is both shocked and intrigued by Petruchio's unflustered responses to her verbal assaults. However, Petruchio arrives very late for his own wedding and is dressed inappropriately in rags, which embarrasses Kate. To make matters worse, during the wedding ceremony, Petruchio strikes the priest and drinks the wine. After the wedding, Petruchio insists on immediately leaving before the reception and takes Catherine to his home against her will. After the newlyweds leave, Gremio and Tranio, who is disguised as Lucentio, formally vie for Bianca's hand. Tranio easily outbids Gremio, who quickly loses interest. Battista says that if Lucentio's father will confirm the dowry, Bianca and Tranio, pretending to be Lucio, can marry. Tranio realizes that they'll need someone to pretend to be Vincenzo, Lucentio's father. Meanwhile, Tranio persuades Hortensio that Bianca is not worthy of his attention, thus removing Lucentio's one remaining rival. Once back home in Verona, Petruchio begins to start taming his new wife. Petruchio denies Kate food, sleep, and clothing because nothing, according to Petruchio, is good enough for her. For example, he complains that perfectly cooked meat is overcooked, a beautiful dress doesn't fit right, and a stylish hat is not fashionable. He also disagrees with anything she says, thus forcing her to agree with everything he says, no matter how absurd it is. In fact, on the way back to Padua to attend Bianca's wedding, Kate agrees with Petruchio that the sun is the moon. As they travel, they meet Lucentio's father, Vincenzo, who is also on his way to Padua. Meanwhile, in Padua, Lucentio and Tranio convince a passing visitor to pretend to be Vincenzo and confirm the dowry for Bianca. The man does so, and Battista happily agrees to have Bianca wed Lucentio, who is actually still Tranio in disguise. Are you confused yet? But Bianca is in on the deception, and she secretly elopes with the real Lucentio. However, when the real Vincenzo arrives in Padua, he encounters the visitor who claims to be Lucentio's father. Tranio, still disguised as Lucentio, appears, and the visitor acknowledges him to be his son Lucentio. In all the confusion, the real Vincenzo is about to be arrested when the real Lucentio enters with his new bride Bianca. Lucentio comes clean to the bewildered Baptista and Vincentio, and all is forgiven by the two fathers. Meanwhile, Hortensio marries a wealthy widow, and in the final scene of the play, there is a banquet celebration for the three newlywed couples, Bianca and Lucentio, the widow and Hortensio, and Catherine and Petruchio. The participants are all still convinced that Petruchio is now married to a shrew, and a good-natured challenge develops amongst the three men about whose wife is the most obedient. Petruchio proposes a wager in which each husband will send a servant to call for his wife, and whichever wife comes most obediently will win the bet for her husband. Katharina is the only one of the three who comes back, and Petruchio wins. Kate then brings the other two wives into the room and gives a speech on why wives should be obedient to their husbands. The play ends with Baptista doubling his dowry and Hortensio and Lucentio marveling at how successfully Petruchio has tamed his wife, both of whom ironically emerge as the happiest couple of the three. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable characters in The Taming of the Shrew. In most of the history plays, characters often go by more than one name because of their titles and promotions, but in The Taming of the Shrew, characters often have more than one name because they're in disguise. Baptista Minola of Padua is a wealthy man who has two daughters. The elder daughter is Katharina, or Catherine, or Kate. She is the shrew for which the play is named. She's headstrong, ill-tempered, and doesn't suffer fools well. Unlike her modest younger sister Bianca, Kate doesn't have any male suitors longing to marry her. For that reason, Baptista declares that no one can marry Bianca until Kate comes to a husband. Both Grumio and Hortensio want to marry Bianca. They put aside their rivalry in order to find Kate a husband, but you never really get the impression that either of them is in love with her younger sister. It's almost as if they really don't know Bianca at all. They just admire her for her beauty. Lucentio comes to Padua from Pisa, along with his servants Tranio and Biondello. As soon as Lucentio spies Bianca, it's love at first sight for him, or at least it's infatuation at first sight. He goes undercover as her language tutor in order to woo her. And of course we have Petruchio of Verona, who comes to wive it wealthily in Padua, along with his amusing servant Grumio. Petruchio already has money because his father died and left him his estate, but he's a shrewd businessman and recognizes that his position would be very attractive for getting a father to provide a large dowry for his daughter. Although neither Kate nor Petruchio seem overly concerned with love in marriage, they both enjoy it once they discover it. The two of them behave much like Beatrice and Benedict in Much Ado About Nothing, but eventually come to appreciate, respect, and admire each other for their good qualities and how each one complements the other. When we return, we'll look at some of the plot devices and memorable scenes from The Taming of the Shrew. The Taming of the Shrew is one of Shakespeare's earlier comedies and doesn't employ as many of the common plot devices as we've come to expect in some of his later works. However, there are a few worth noting. First, we have disguised characters, and there certainly are a lot of these. We have the sleeping Christopher Sly, who is dressed as a wealthy lord in order to deceive him when he wakes up. There's also the page Bartholomew, who is dressed as Christopher Sly's wife. There's Lucentio, disguised as Cambio, a language tutor. There's Tranio, dressed as his master Lucentio. There's Hortensio, who is disguised as Lizio, a music and mathematics tutor. And there's Petruchio, who arrives at his wedding dressed in old rags and fantastic attire, as does his servant Grumio. We also have an outrageous constraint which lends itself to most of the action and direction in the play. In this case, it's a father who will not allow his beautiful and popular younger daughter to marry before his older and strong-willed daughter is fitted with a husband. Once again, we have a father who selects a husband for both of his daughters. In Catherine's case, it's an arranged marriage and against her will, but in the long run, it's probably the best thing for her. Baptista also arranges a marriage between Bianca and Lucentio based on his ability to provide the wealthiest dower, but in this case, Bianca has already expressed her love for Lucentio, even though her father doesn't really know who he is. We also have a play within a play, sort of. An induction is a framework in which another story is being told. We have the beginning of the induction in The Taming of the Shrew, but Shakespeare never comes back to the induction at the end of the play. As far as memorable scenes go, let's just look at 3. First, in Act 2, Scene 1, in which Petruchio first meets Kate, what's most important about this scene is that Petruchio has already been warned what to expect about her, but Kate has no idea what to expect from Petruchio. I'm sure she thinks he's just another fool like the other suitors she's seen, but we soon realize that when it comes to outrageous behavior, she is no match for this calculating bachelor. We see Petruchio plotting his strategy to win over his intended bride in the soliloquy. I'll attend her here and woo her with some spirit when she comes. Say that she rail. Why then I'll tell her plain she sings as sweetly as a nightingale. Say that she frown. I'll say she looks as clear as morning roses newly washed with dew. Say she be mute and will not speak a word. Then I'll commend her volubility and say she uttereth piercing eloquence. If she do bid me pack, I'll give her thanks as though she bid me stay by her a week. If she deny to wed, I'll crave the day when I shall ask the banns and when be married. Later, in Act 4, Scene 1, after the couple is married and back at Petruchio's country home in Verona, he continues his strategy for taming a wife in another soliloquy as Kate goes to bed hungry and doesn't get much sleep. Petruchio says, "Thus have I politically begun my reign, and 'tis my hope to end successfully. My falcon now is sharp and passing empty, and till she stoop she must not be full gorged, for then she never looks upon her lure. Another way I have to man my haggard, to make her come and know her keeper's call. That is to watch her as we watch these kites that bait and beat and will not be obedient. She ate no meat today, nor none shall eat. Last night she slept not, nor tonight she shall not. As with the meat, some undeserved fault I'll find about the making of the bed, and here I'll fling the pillow, there the bolster, this way the coverlet, another way the sheets. Aye, and amid this hurly I intend that all is done in reverend care of her. And in conclusion she shall watch all night, and if she chance to nod, I'll rail and brawl, and with the clamor keep her still awake. This is the way to kill a wife with kindness, and thus I'll curb her mad and headstrong humor. He that knows better how to tame a shrew, now let him speak, 'tis charity to show." Another very memorable scene takes place in Act 3, Scene 2, when we see that Catherine is upset because Petruchio arrives late for his own wedding. Think about this. If she didn't want to marry him, why would she be upset about this? But the scene turns to farce when Petruchio actually does arrive, outrageously dressed in rags for his wedding, and whisks Kate away from all of the celebrants the moment it's over. Of course, the most memorable scene in the play is in Act 5, Scene 2, when Kate gives her speech about the duty wives owe their husbands. Most of the criticism of this play has to do with the fact that some view Petruchio as gaslighting Catherine. Gaslighting is defined as a form of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. It involves deliberately feeding false information to victims, causing them to question their memory, perception, and sanity. Gaslighting can lead to confusion, loss of confidence, and dependency on the perpetrator. But what critics fail to understand is that both Petruchio and Catherine benefit from loving one another. It's not that Catherine doesn't love men. She just doesn't want to be married to a fool. She's looking for someone who could be her intellectual equal, and she finds that in Petruchio. Petruchio is also not without his good qualities. He's faithful, sober, a good negotiator, and has been a good steward of his father's inheritance and increased it. He wants Catherine to have nice clothing and provides her with a comfortable home full of servants to attend her. He gives thanks to God for their food. He brings her to see her family. He says that she's even more beautiful in person than she's been described, and he responsibly arranges to provide very sufficiently for her should she outlive him. Through her marriage to Petruchio, we see Catherine grow in her compassion for the servants who get beaten unjustly, in her appreciation for beautiful clothes that Petruchio orders for her, and gain a greater understanding of the benefits that two committed spouses can enjoy in a loving marriage. We also see her grow in self-confidence when she loses her inhibitions about kissing her husband in public. I once heard a professional dog trainer explain that a domesticated dog cannot survive on its own without its master. The reason why most dogs behave badly is because they disrespect a master that doesn't demonstrate that he or she can be depended upon to provide food and nourishment to the dog. Therefore, dogs look for clear leadership, and they want to know exactly what their master expects of them. Once they understand the rules, they're eager to follow them because they benefit greatly by cooperating. While I'm not comparing Catherine to a dog, we see in this play that once she understands that Petruchio is merely playing a game and the prize is that they'll have a happy, loving, and cooperative marriage, Catherine agrees to play along. It's almost as if the two of them have their own private inside joke, and the joke is on the observers at the feast, who wind up giving the happy couple more than 20,000 crowns as part of their prize. Now, you tell me, is not this well? When we return, we'll look at some of the major themes that run through the Taming of the Shrew. Two of the themes that run through the Taming of the Shrew are pretense and absurdity. Almost everybody in the play is pretending about something. It starts in the induction scene where the Lord convinces the huntsman, his page Bartholomew, and his servants to pretend that the drunken tinker, Christopher Sly, is really a wealthy lord when he wakes up. He even lies to the acting troupe. Lucentio pretends to be a language tutor named Cambio in order to have access to Bianca. Bianca pretends that Lucentio is just her tutor until she runs away and elopes with him. Tranio pretends to be his master Lucentio. The pedant pretends to be Vincentio. Biondello pretends that he doesn't know the real Vincentio. Hortensio pretends to be Lucio in order to pose as a music and mathematics tutor so that he can woo Bianca. Grumio pretends that he didn't give the tailor the instructions for Kate's dress. Kate pretends that she doesn't like men or want a husband, and Petruchio pretends that the meat is overcooked, the clothes he ordered for Kate are awful, the bed is no good, the sun is the moon, 2 o'clock is really 7 o'clock, and that Kate is eager to marry him. Ah, what fools these mortals be. Farce allows us to see how people react when circumstances are exaggerated, and the more extreme the exaggerations, the more absurd the farce. First, we have a father with 2 daughters who, despite having eager suitors for the younger daughter, will not let her marry until the older daughter gets a husband. Actually, this wasn't a bad strategy because it really did work. However, most people would not want to be bound by this arrangement. Next, we have the super absurd Kate the Cursed, who rails, hits, and insults her father, her sister's suitors, her suitor Petruchio, and his servant Grumio. We also have the outrageous Petruchio, who arrives late and in rags for his wedding, accosts the priest during the ceremony, beats his servants for no reason, and calls an old man a young gentlewoman. Good farce may be light and silly, but it isn't always easy to pull off. However, when applied to the battle of the sexes, it's hard not to find some relatable humor, and when we see how absurd it is, It helps us to recognize that most of our relationship disagreements are really not that serious. In The Taming of the Shrew, true love is rather sparse. Lucentio and Bianca seem to be more infatuated with each other than in love with one another. They can't even make it through the wedding feast without disagreeing. Hortensio seems to have married on the rebound and taken the widow almost as a consolation prize after abandoning Bianca. Love seems almost unimportant to Petruchio and Kate. Certainly respect seems much more important to the couple. It takes them almost the entire play before they start to understand each other, and that's why compatibility is so important. You can see it with all three couples, but it's most obvious with Kate and Petruchio as they gradually grow in mutual understanding, love, and respect for one another. When we return, we'll look at some of the most powerful lines from The Taming of the Shrew. Because of its length, I only want to concentrate on Act 5, Scene 2, where we have the most famous and most controversial speech in the entire play. This is Catherine talking about what duty a wife owes her husband in obedience. By the way, check out on YouTube Octavia Selina Alexandru, aka the Insane Artist, doing this speech. It is absolutely spectacular. So here we have Catherine's response when Petruchio says, "Catherine, I charge thee, tell these headstrong women what duty they do owe their lords and husbands." And Catherine begins, "Fie, fie, unknit that threatening, unkind brow, and dart not scornful glances from those eyes to wound thy lord, thy king, thy governor. It blots thy beauty as frosts do bite the meads, confounds thy fame as whirlwinds shake fair buds, and in no sense is meet or amiable. A woman moved is like a fountain troubled, muddy, ill-seeming, thick, bereft of beauty, and while it is so, none so dry or thirsty will deign to sip or touch one drop of it. Thy husband is thy lord, thy life, thy keeper, thy head, thy sovereign, one who cares for thee, and for thy maintenance commits his body to painful labor both by sea and land, to watch the night in storms, the day in cold, whilst thou liest warm at home, secure and safe, and craves no other tribute at thy hands but love, fair looks, and true obedience. Too little payment for so great a debt. Such duty as the subject owes the prince, even such a woman oweth to her husband, and when she is froward, peevish, sullen, sour, and not obedient to his honest will, what is she but a foul contending rebel and graceless traitor to her loving lord? I am ashamed that women are so simple to offer war when they should kneel for peace, or to seek rule, supremacy, and sway, when they are bound to serve, love, and obey. Why are our bodies soft and weak and smooth, unapt to toil and trouble in the world, but that our soft conditions and our hearts should well agree with our external parts? Come, come, you froward and unable worms, my mind hath been as big as one of yours, my heart as great, my reason haply more, to bandy word for word and frown for frown. But now I see our lances are but straws, our strength as weak, our weakness past compare, that seeming to be most, which we indeed least are. Then veil your stomachs, for it is no boot, and place your hands below your husband's foot, in token of which duty, if he please, my hand is ready, may it do him ease. And Petruchio says, "Why, there's a wench. Come on and kiss me, Kate. The basis for Kate's words can be found in St. Paul's epistle to the Ephesians, chapter 5, verses 22 to 33. He says, "Let women be subject to husbands as the Lord, because the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. Therefore, as the church is subject to Christ, so also let wives be to their husbands in all things. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ also loved the church and delivered himself up for it. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular love his wife as himself, and let the wife fear her husband." And by fear he means mind or respect. Say what you will, but in a society where women's prosperity depended primarily on marrying well, a loyal and dependable husband and a loving, devoted wife make for a very good match. When we return, we'll look at some of the major turning points in the Taming of the Shrew and some correlations to the other Shakespeare plays. Let's take a look at 4 major turning points in this play. The first one is in Act 1, Scene 2, when Petruchio arrives on the scene to break the stalemate and give the other suitors an opportunity to woo Bianca. I love how he rebukes his skeptical suitors. Petruchio boasts of his bravery and fearlessness against a high-strung woman. Listen to what he says to Hortensio, Gremio, and Grumio. "Think you a little din can daunt mine ears? Have I not in my time heard lions roar? Have I not heard the sea puffed up with winds, rage like an angry boar chafed with sweat? Have I not heard great ordnance in the field, and heaven's artillery thunder in the skies? Have I not in a pitched battle heard loud alarums, neighing steeds, and trumpets clang? And do you tell me of a woman's tongue that gives not half so great a blow to hear as will a chestnut in a farmer's fire? Tush, tush, fear boys with bugs." Petruchio's tales of bravery sound fairly similar to the tales Othello told that won over Desdemona. Next we have in Act 4, Scene 2, when Lucentio eliminates his rivals and clears his way to elope with Bianca. Now, in order to set up the next turning point, let's look at Catherine in Act 4, Scene 3. This is after she's had a chance to process what's happened to her since they've arrived at Petruchio's home in Verona. "The more my wrong, the more his spite appears. What? Did he marry me to famish me? Beggars that come unto my father's door upon entreaty have a present alms. If not elsewhere they meet with charity. But I, who never knew how to entreat, nor never needed that I should entreat, am starved for meat, giddy for lack of sleep, with oaths kept waking and with brawling fed. And that which spites me more than all these wants, he does it under name of perfect love." This is where the light bulb finally goes off for her. She starts to grasp that it's not only okay with Petruchio if she plays along with him, he encourages her to do so by setting her up. This leads to Act 4, Scene 6, when Petruchio, Kate, and Hortensio are on their way back to Padua to attend Bianca's wedding feast. Once again, Petruchio starts speaking nonsense, claiming that the sun is the moon and an old man is a young girl. And with a little help from Hortensio, Kate finally starts catching on as to what Petruchio has been doing all along, playing a game and inviting her to play along with him. And finally, we have Act 5, Scene 1, when Petruchio asks Kate to kiss him outside in public. At first she refuses, and he says that they'll go all the way back to Verona. Once Kate hears this, she takes the easy way out and agrees to kiss him in public. This is when she finally seems to recognize how to play the game. There are also some interesting correlations between The Taming of the Shrew and some of the other Shakespeare plays. The play ends with 3 weddings, or at least 3 newlywed couples. The same is true in Twelfth Night, A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, and we'll optimistically assume the same comes true in Measure for Measure. We have a bizarre marriage condition, which is also true for Portia in The Merchant of Venice, Antiochus's daughter, not to mention Thaisa, in Pericles' Prince of Tyre, Hermia in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Helen in All's Well That Ends Well, and the Princess of France and her 3 attending ladies in Love's Labour's Lost. Lucentio and Bianca must deceive her father in order to marry. That also happens to Master Fenton and Anne Page in The Merry Wives of Windsor, Romeo and Juliet, Othello and Desdemona, and Jessica and Lorenzo in The Merchant of Venice. There's a lot of slapstick humor in this play. We see Petruchio beating his servants for things that are not their fault. We also saw Falstaff get beaten severely by Master Ford in The Merry Wives of Windsor. Both Dromios get beaten by their own and each other's masters in The Comedy of Errors. Stephano wrongfully beats Trinculo in The Tempest, and Ajax beats Thersites, who in turn beats Ajax in Troilus and Cressida. Petruchio and Kate bicker as a couple, like Beatrice and Benedick in Much Ado About Nothing, Audrey and Touchstone in As You Like It, and Hotspur and Lady Percy in Henry IV, Part 1. We have the forbidden courtship of Lucentio and Bianca, just as we have with Posthumus and Imogen in Cymbeline, Perdita and Florizel in The Winter's Tale, Jessica and Lorenzo in The Merchant of Venice, Valentine and Sylvia in The 2 Gentlemen of Verona, Margaret and Suffolk in Henry VI, Part 1, Romeo and Juliet, Othello and Desdemona, and Master Fenton and Anne Page in The Merry Wives of Windsor. In The Taming of the Shrew, the traveling pedant is told that it is death for someone from Mantua to visit Padua. In The Comedy of Errors, Aegeon is told that it is death for someone from Syracuse to come to Ephesus. The 2 Vincentios argue back and forth from inside and outside of a house, just like the 2 Dromios in The Comedy of Errors. We also have a lot of characters who go around in disguises in order to gain access on a different level of status. We also have this happen with Hal and Ned Poins in Henry IV, Part 2, Portia in The Merchant of Venice, Joan of Arc and the soldiers dressed as peddlers in Henry VI, Part 1, Henry V, who disguises himself as Harry Leroy in Henry V, Kent and Edgar in King Lear, and Prince Florizel, who passes himself off as a shepherd in The Winter's Tale. By the way, Henry VI also tried this in Henry VI Part 3, but he didn't really have much success. And certainly, Catherine is not the only shrew in a Shakespeare play. There's Lady Macbeth in Macbeth, who repeatedly emasculates her husband whenever she can't get him to go along with her evil plotting. There's Dionysa in Pericles' Prince of Tyre, who also puts down her husband for not supporting her assassination attempt on Marina. Cleopatra also has her moments in Antony and Cleopatra when she doesn't get her way or doesn't like what she hears. And of course, we have Margaret of Anjou, who upon becoming Queen of England in Henry VI Part 2, is transformed into a shrew and berates her timid and pious husband for being effeminate and unwilling to stand up for himself and their son in Henry VI Part 3. Lucentio tells his servant Biondello that Tranio had to trade places with him because he killed a man. This isn't true. When Valentine is captured and questioned by forest-dwelling bandits in The 2 Gentlemen of Verona, he also says that he was banished because he killed a man. That wasn't true either. Catherine is transformed through her interactions with Petruchio. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, Bottom is transformed by Puck. Hal is transformed through his role and responsibilities in Henry IV Parts 1 and 2 and in Henry V. Queen Margaret is transformed through war, hardship, and the deaths of her lover Suffolk, her husband Henry VI, and her son Edward through Henry VI Parts 1, 2, and 3, and in Richard III. Grumio confuses meanings and words, sometimes on purpose, like Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream, elbow in Measure for Measure, Dogberry in Much Ado About Nothing, and Mistress Quickly in Henry IV Parts 1 and 2, Henry V, and The Merry Wives of Windsor. Catherine and her sister Bianca almost get into a catfight, but it's broken up by their father Battista. A catfight is narrowly avoided between Queen Margaret and Dame Eleanor in Henry VI Part 2, and of course, Helen and Hermia actually do have a catfight in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Lucentio's love at first sight description of Bianca is similar to that of Romeo's after seeing Juliet for the very first time. In Act 3, Scene 2, Tranio says of Petruchio's fantastic wedding clothes, "He hath some meaning in his mad attire." In Hamlet Act 2, Scene 2, Polonius says of Hamlet's strange behavior, "Though he be mad, there is method in it." Grumio employs Lucentio/Cambio to woo Bianca for him, but Lucentio woos her for himself. In The Two Gentlemen of Verona, the Duke has Proteus woo Silvia for Thurio, but Proteus woos her for himself. And finally, Bianca's suitors Hortensio and Grumio eventually give up, as do Portia's suitors in The Merchant of Venice, Thais' suitors in Pericles, Prince of Tyre, and Silvia's suitors in The Two Gentlemen of Verona. When we return, we'll look at some interesting facts about the taming of the shrew. In preparing to do this episode, I did some research and I came across some interesting facts. In the play, we often hear terms like froward, which means willful, pedant, which means schoolmaster, foreigner, or visitor, and peremptory, which means domineering. The name Bianca means white, the name Lucentio means light, and the name Grumio doesn't mean anything. It's just the word groom with an Italian ending. At the beginning of the play, Grumio says he would rather cart Kate than court her. Carting was a practice in England in which disobedient wives or prostitutes were carted around the town on a wagon and publicly humiliated for their bad behavior. However, this custom had gone out of fashion and was prohibited in 1452, about 40 years before the play was written. By the way, having a wife put her hand below her husband's foot, that was just a gesture of respect, much like when you bow before a king to offer your head in case he wants to chop it off. That practice is still practiced in a traditional Roman Catholic Church. In the early 1980s, I saw The Taming of the Shrew performed in the acoustically perfect Hofstra University Theater in Uniondale, New York. It was the very first Shakespeare play I'd ever attended. The cast was made up of theater majors from the school, and they flew in actor Patrick Duffy from the television series Dallas to perform Petruchio. Shakespeare did not use one specific source for the Petruchio and Catherine story, but drew from various sources including Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The play was written around 1592. There was also another Elizabethan play called The Taming of a Shrew, which has an almost identical plot but contains different lines and character names. The Taming of the Shrew's exact relationship to The Taming of a Shrew is unknown, as is the author. And finally, in 1611, John Fletcher, who was Shakespeare's successor as house playwright for the King's Men, wrote The Tamer Tamed as a sequel to Shakespeare's play, in which Petruchio remarries after Katharina's death, and his new wife successfully attempts to tame him, Thus, the tamer becomes the tamed. In all its different incantations, I remind you that Shakespeare loved to shine a light on human beings caught in the act of being human beings. He never provides us only one definitive behavior in any of his characters, but shows us different angles of them because he knows how complicated we creatures can be. Therefore, I urge you not to be too critical of Kate, Petruchio, or Shakespeare. Instead, I encourage you to remember that great line by Jane Austen's character, Mr. Bennet, in Pride and Prejudice, when he reflects, saying, "Well, what do we live for but to make sport for our neighbors and laugh at them in our turn?" When we return, we'll look at some of the great actors in the 1980 BBC Shakespeare version of The Taming of the Shrew. All right, now let's take a look at some of the actors in the 1980 BBC Shakespeare version of The Taming of the Shrew. John Franklin Robbins, who plays Battista Minola, also played Antonio in The Merchant of Venice, also in 1980. He also played Mr. Cole in the 1996 version of Emma with Gwyneth Paltrow. The great actor Anthony Pedley, who plays Tranio, also played Agrippa in Antony and Cleopatra, Rodrigo in Othello, and Ajax in Troilus and Cressida, all in 1981, and Junius Brutus in Coriolanus in 1984. Simon Chandler, who plays Lucentio, also played Eros in Antony and Cleopatra in 1981, and Master Fenton in The Merry Wives of Windsor in 1982. John Bird, who plays the pedant, also played the painter in Timon of Athens in 1981, and the Duke of Albany in King Lear in 1982. Harry Waters, who plays Biondello, also played Phidias in Antony and Cleopatra in 1981, and the King of France in King Lear in 1982. David Kincaid, who plays Grumio, also played the first bandit in Timon of Athens, and Cleopatra's messenger in Antony and Cleopatra, both in 1981. David Kinsey, who plays the haberdasher, also played the jeweler in Timon and Athens in 1981, and a servant to Paris in Troilus and Cressida, also in 1981. Bev Willis, who plays Baptista's servant, also played Vero's servant in Timon of Athens in 1981. Gil Morris, who plays Philip, also played a soldier in Timon and Athens in 1981. John Barron, who plays Vincentio, also played the Duke of Venice in Othello in 1981. Derek Dedman, who plays Nicholas, also played the second bandit in Timon of Athens in 1981. And finally, the incredible John Cleese from Monty Python's Flying Circus television series and movies was perfectly cast as the madcap and outrageous Petruchio. I also want to make sure to remind you to check out the incredible 1953 Cole Porter hit musical Kiss Me, Kate. It's got a great cast including Howard Keel as Fred Graham and Petruchio, and the beautiful Katherine Grayson as Lily Vanessa and Kate. By the way, both of them had starred together in Showboat in 1951. Kurt Kasner, who played Baptista, also plays Alexander Fitzhugh in one of my favorite TV series of all time, Land of the Giants. The show also features excellent dancers including Bobby Van as Gremio and Bob Fosse as Hortensio. And speaking of dancing, they don't come any better than Ann Miller, who plays Lois Lane and Bianca. She made this movie when she was just 29 years old, and I defy you to find better tap dancing anywhere than in her performance of the number It's Too Darn Hot. By the way, I happened to see Ann Miller starring in Sugar Babies alongside Mickey Rooney in 1979 on Broadway, and at age 55, she hadn't lost a beat in her tap dancing, which is said to have been clocked at 500 beats per minute. Cole Porter used his incredible talent to write some of the most memorable songs of his career for this musical, including Another Opening, Another Show, Wunderbar, which the Andrews Sisters recorded, So in Love, which has been recorded by about 50 different artists, I've come to wive it wealthily in Padua, and Where is the Life which late I led? Both of these song titles are directly taken from lines in The Taming of the Shrew, and From This Moment On, which was a huge song for Frank Sinatra in 1957. And if you're not familiar with Cole Porter's work, just understand this. He was as talented at writing clever lyrics for show tunes and popular songs as Shakespeare was at writing magnificent sonnets and plays. This was best demonstrated in Kiss Me Kate by the spectacular singing and dancing actors Keenan Wynn as Lippy and James Whitmore as Slug, two gangsters who through thick Brooklyn accents deliver the musical's funniest and most memorable song, Brush Up Your Shakespeare. I won't sing it for you because this is a comedy and that would turn it into a tragedy, but I will share most of the lyrics with you so that you can appreciate the Shakespearean references in the song. The girls today in society go for classical poetry, so to win their hearts you must quote with ease Aeschylus and Euripides, but the poet of them all, who will stardom simply raven, is the poet people call the Bard of Stratford-on-Avon. Brush up your Shakespeare. Start quoting him now. Brush up your Shakespeare, and the women you will wow. Just reclaim a few lines from Othello, and they'll think you're a heck of a fella. If your blonde won't respond when you flatter her, tell her what Tony told Cleopatra. And if still to be shocked she pretends well, just remind her that all's well that ends well. Brush up your Shakespeare, and they'll all kowtow. With the wife of the British ambassador, try a crack out of Troilus and Cressida. If she says she won't buy it or take it, make her take it what's more as you like it. If she then wants an all-by-herself night, let her rest every 11th or 12th night. Brush up your Shakespeare, and they'll all kowtow. If your girl is a Washington Heights dream, treat the kid to a Midsummer's Night Dream. If she fights when her clothes you are mussing, what are clothes much ado about nussing? If she says your behavior is heinous, kick her right in the Coriolanus. Brush up your Shakespeare, and they'll all kowtow. Think thou, and they'll all kowtow. I trow, and they'll all kowtow. Odds bodkins. You really have to admire the cleverness of someone who can so easily combine lines from Shakespeare's plays written over 400 years ago with modern music. Now stay tuned for today's trivia challenge called One Character, Four Plays. All right, now it's time for today's trivia challenge, which is called One Character, Four Plays. In which four plays do each of the following characters appear? Number 1, Bardolph. Number 2, Margaret of Anjou. And number 3, Mistress Quickly. When we return, I'll have the answers for you, as well as some relevant lessons from the Taming of the Shrew. Okay, let's see how you did on today's trivia challenge, which was called One Character, Four Plays. In which four plays do each of the following characters appear? Number 1, Bardolph. That was Henry IV, Part 1, Henry IV, Part 2, Henry V, and the Merry Wives of Windsor. Number 2, Margaret of Anjou. She appears in Henry VI, Part 1, Henry VI, Part 2, Henry VI, Part 3, and Richard III. And number 3, Mistress Quickly. She appears in Henry IV, Part 1, Henry IV, Part 2, Henry V, and the Merry Wives of Windsor, just like Bardolph. Now, let's wrap up with some relevant lessons from the Taming of the Shrew. First, the quality of your life is based directly on the quality of your communication. Make sure that you're always working on your listening skills as well as your verbal skills. Remember that in sales, your ability to sell is in direct proportion to your ability to effectively communicate how what you sell will help your customers either gain pleasure or avoid pain. Second, learn the art of give and take in your relationships. The best relationships are the ones in which each side is heard and respected by the other. This is not limited to romantic relationships either. You'll find that it will work well equally with employees and customers. And finally, don't treat your marriage like a farce. If you want your wife to obey you, make sure you're a husband worth obeying. Your chief responsibility as a husband is to treat your wife like Christ treats his bride, the church. If you treat your wife with loving kindness and respect, if you cherish her and continually put her own needs ahead of yours, you'll find yourself in a loving relationship that can endure all of life's challenges. I'm Dave Romeo, and thank you for watching this episode of Romeo and Shakespeare. Please join me next time for the Season 3 season premiere, when a young woman dresses up like a page in order to disguise both her sex and her age.